Hi folks, in today's video we dive deep into a creepy and disturbing story from the dark web. While the events described are chilling and unsettling, it's important to remember that there is no solid proof or evidence to back up these claims. These are personal stories, often shared by those who claim to have experienced the horrors of the dark web firsthand. The tale you'll hear today is just one of many mysterious and eerie accounts that seem to circulate online. Although there's no concrete evidence to verify these stories, the fear and suspense behind them are real to those who lived through it. Some of the events are hard to believe, but that's the nature of the dark web. It's a place where reality and fiction often blend together, creating a world of uncertainty and danger. As you watch, keep in mind that while the details seem vivid, they belong to the realm of urban legends and personal experiences. They serve as a chilling reminder of the hidden dangers lurking online, and how even a simple click can lead you into the unknown. So, sit back, relax, and let's journey through this haunting tale. Just don't forget to be cautious about what you might find in the shadows of the internet. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more spine-chilling tales. Stay safe and keep your curiosity in check when diving into the dark corners of the web. It all started with an email, an anonymous tip buried in the thousands of messages that cluttered my inbox. The subject line read, "They're hiding something big, look into the clinic." I almost ignored it. After all, I was a journalist, not a conspiracy theorist. But something about the message gnawed at me. Maybe it was the cryptic tone, or perhaps it was the promise of a story too big to ignore. Either way, I found myself compelled to dig deeper. The clinic in question was a luxurious wellness center on the outskirts of town. Known for its exclusive clientele and groundbreaking rejuvenation treatments, it had an aura of mystery that was hard to penetrate. The ultra-rich and famous frequented its pristine halls, emerging weeks later looking years younger. Privacy was their unspoken promise, and they kept it well, too well. Intrigued by the allure of secrecy, I began my research. At first, all I found were glowing reviews and unsubstantiated rumors about their miraculous treatment. Nothing unusual for a place catering to the wealthy. But a few days into my investigation, I stumbled upon something far more sinister. A hidden forum on the dark web, tucked away from the prying eyes of the public. The topic was something called Fetus Milkshake. At first, I thought it was some sick joke, a dark internet meme designed to shock and disturb. But the posts were unsettlingly serious. The users of the forum spoke of it in hushed tones, as if even typing the words invited danger. The milkshake was allegedly a powerful elixir, capable of reversing aging and bestowing vitality beyond imagination. But the price was monstrous. The ingredients? Human fetuses, harvested under horrifying and illegal circumstances. My stomach turned as I read through the chilling discussions. The posts detailed a clandestine network supplying these fetuses to an elite clientele willing to pay astronomical sums for the promise of eternal youth. And at the heart of this dark operation was the very clinic I had been investigating. The more I read, the more the pieces began to fall into place. The clinic's secretive nature, the exorbitant fees, the whispers of miraculous results, it all pointed to something far more sinister than mere cosmetic procedures. I knew I was onto something, but I didn't realize just how dangerous the path I had chosen would become. I published a vague article hinting at the clinic's questionable practices, careful not to reveal too much without concrete evidence. It was enough to attract attention, and not the good kind. Almost immediately, the threats began. Anonymous messages flooded my inbox, warning me to back off. My phone started behaving strangely, with apps opening and closing on their own. My emails were hacked, and my internet activity was monitored. Someone wanted me silenced. One evening, as I returned home, I found a small package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a vial filled with a milky substance, labeled "Sample, do not consume." My hands trembled as I held it, a cold chill running down my spine. They knew where I lived. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to take a risk. I scheduled a consultation at the clinic, posing as a potential client interested in their rejuvenation treatments. The inside of the clinic was as opulent as I had imagined, with marble floors, plush seating, and an air of calm sophistication. But beneath the surface glamour there was something off, a feeling of unease that I couldn't shake. After the consultation, I lingered, pretending to be indecisive. When no one was looking, I slipped into a restricted area, my heart pounding in my chest. What I found was a hidden lab, and the sight before me was worse than anything I had imagined. Rows upon rows of vials, identical to the one I had received, lined the shelves. Charts and notes detailing grotesque experiments were scattered across the room, all aimed at perfecting the fetus milkshake. The sources were clear. Human fetuses, harvested from clandestine operations involving kidnapped women and illegal medical practices. I grabbed as much evidence as I could carry and fled the clinic, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just witnessed. I had the story of a lifetime, proof of a horrifying conspiracy that went far beyond anything I had ever encountered. But just as I prepared to go public with the story, a chilling message arrived. A video showing my younger sister, tied up in a dark room, fear etched across her face. A voiceover warned, "Publish the story and she pays the price." Now, I'm caught between two worlds, truth and terror. The clinic's secret is too big to hide, but the cost of exposure is too personal to bear. Every day, I wrestle with the decision, knowing that in the shadows of the dark web, monsters lurk, and some secrets are deadly to uncover. For days, I could barely think straight. The video of my sister haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her terrified expression, heard the muffled cries of desperation. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer just a story, it was a life-or-death situation. My instinct as a journalist urged me to expose the truth, but the threat to my sister's life left me paralyzed with fear. I replayed the video countless times, searching for any clue that might help me locate her. The room she was in was dimly lit, the walls bare. There were no distinguishing features, no windows, no sounds that could provide a hint of her whereabouts. It was as if she had been swallowed by the void. In a moment of clarity, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, someone who could navigate the murky waters of the dark web and potentially trace the origins of the video. Reluctantly, I reached out to an old friend, Marcus, a cybersecurity expert who had always been a bit of a rogue. If anyone could help, it was him. Meeting Marcus in a dimly lit cafe, I laid everything out for him. The investigation, the threats, the video. His usual cocky demeanor faded as he listened, replaced by a serious, almost grim expression. "This is serious, Anna. You've kicked a hornet's nest. But I'll help you. Let's see what we can dig up." Over the next few days, Marcus worked tirelessly, sifting through layers of encryption, bouncing signals, and tracing the origin of the video. His skill was remarkable, but the deeper he went, the more unsettling the findings became. The network behind the Fetus Milkshake was vast, with ties to powerful figures who could squash any opposition like a bug. "This isn't just a clinic," Marcus explained one evening. "It's part of a much larger operation. The people behind this have resources and influence. They've been operating in the shadows for years, maybe decades." Despite the grim reality, Marcus was able to extract a small but significant piece of information, a location. The video had been uploaded from a remote facility outside the city, a place that didn't appear on any official map. It was our best lead, but it was also a massive risk. "You can't just walk in there," Marcus warned. "They'll be expecting you." But I couldn't sit idle. With Marcus's help, I devised a plan. It wasn't foolproof, but it was all I had. Under the cover of night, we made our way to the facility. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I felt inside. Armed with nothing but a small camera and sheer determination, I crept through the shadows, hoping to find my sister and the evidence needed to take these monsters down. Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of sterile corridors and locked rooms. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Every creak, every shadow felt like a threat. As I moved deeper, I found rooms filled with equipment that mirrored what I'd seen in the clinic's hidden lab. Vials, charts, and the unmistakable stench of something deeply wrong. Finally, in a room at the end of a long corridor, I found her. My sister, weak but alive, bound to a chair. The relief that washed over me was short-lived, replaced by the realization that we weren't alone. Footsteps echoed down the hall, growing louder with each passing second. Frantically, I freed my sister, urging her to stay quiet. We slipped into the shadows just as a group of men entered the room. They were discussing the next steps for their operation, oblivious to our presence. One of them was the clinic's director, the mastermind behind the entire operation. Marcus, monitoring from a safe distance, had warned me that once we rescued my sister, we'd have a narrow window to escape before they noticed something was amiss. But as the men moved further into the facility, I realized this was my chance. I had to capture as much evidence as possible. I recorded their conversation, the plans they were discussing, proof of their horrific deeds. With my heart pounding, we made our way out, every second stretching into an eternity. Marcus was waiting in a getaway car, ready to whisk us away to safety. As we drove off, a wave of emotion crashed over me. Relief, fear, anger. We had made it out, but the battle was far from over. Back at Marcus's place, I pieced together the evidence, crafting a narrative that would expose the truth. But even with everything I had, I knew releasing the story would come at a cost. The people behind this weren't just going to disappear. They would fight back, and I had to be ready. As dawn broke, I sent the story to trusted contacts in the media, ensuring it would reach the public even if something happened to me. The truth was out there, and I could only hope it was enough to bring the operation crashing down. In the days that followed, the story went viral, sending shockwaves through the nation. Authorities raided the clinic and the facility, uncovering the horrors I had witnessed. Arrests were made, but many of the key players had already vanished into the shadows, their network dismantled but not entirely destroyed. I knew this wasn't the end. The darkness I had uncovered was vast, and there would always be those who thrived in the shadows. But for now, I had my sister, and we had exposed a piece of the truth. And that was a start. The days following the raid were a blur. The media frenzy around the Fetus Milkshake scandal was relentless. News outlets from every corner of the globe picked up the story, dissecting the chilling details of the clinic's horrific practices. My face was plastered across screens, hailed as the journalist who exposed a dark, hidden truth. But behind the accolades and headlines, I was far from feeling safe. The authorities assured me that they were doing everything in their power to dismantle the network, but I knew better. The people I was up against were not mere criminals. They were powerful, connected, and ruthless. The clinic was just one part of a larger, more insidious organization that wouldn't go down without a fight. For weeks, I kept a low profile, moving from one safe house to another, always looking over my shoulder. My sister, still shaken from her ordeal, stayed close by, her eyes reflecting the same fear that gripped my heart. Every knock on the door, every unexpected sound, sent us into a state of high alert. We knew the organization wasn't finished with us. Marcus remained my lifeline, constantly monitoring the dark web for any chatter that might indicate a retaliation. One evening, he called with a tone of urgency I hadn't heard before. "They're regrouping," he said. "There's talk of a new leader stepping in, someone even more dangerous. They're blaming you for the collapse of their operation. You need to be prepared for anything." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had expected retaliation, but hearing it confirmed brought a new level of dread. The organization's remnants were regrouping, and they were coming for me. A week later, it happened. In the dead of night, as I was settling into the latest safe house, a message appeared on my phone. It was a video, similar to the one I'd received before, but this time it wasn't my sister. It was Marcus, bound and gagged, his eyes wide with fear. The message was clear. They had him, and they were using him as bait. Panic surged through me, but I knew rushing in blindly would be a death sentence. I needed a plan, a way to rescue Marcus without falling into their trap. With my sister by my side, we brainstormed every possible scenario. We knew the risks, but Marcus had saved us before, and we couldn't leave him to face this alone. The message had come with coordinates, leading to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was the perfect setting for an ambush, but I had no choice. Armed with a recording device, a small handgun Marcus had insisted I carry, and a resolve hardened by fear, I made my way to the location. The warehouse was as ominous as I had imagined. Its towering structure loomed against the night sky, casting long, eerie shadows. I approached cautiously, every sense on high alert. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling into itself. Inside, the scene was as grim as expected. Marcus was tied to a chair in the center of the room, a single light bulb casting a harsh glare over his form. Surrounding him were figures cloaked in darkness, their faces obscured. One of them stepped forward, his voice cold and calculated. "You've caused us a lot of trouble, Anna," he said. "But we're not here to negotiate. You have something we want, your silence." He held up a folder, thick with documents, evidence that could incriminate them further. "We know you have copies of these. Hand them over, and this ends now. Refuse, and your friend here pays the price." I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. They had played their hand, revealing how desperate they were to silence me. But I couldn't give in. I had come too far, exposed too much. Surrendering now would mean erasing everything I had fought for. With trembling hands, I pulled out the recording device, a subtle but defiant gesture. "The world knows who you are. You think killing me or Marcus will stop the truth from spreading? You're already finished." The figure laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the warehouse. "You underestimate our reach. We'll rebuild, stronger and more discreet. You, on the other hand, won't live to see it." Before he could move, a noise from the shadows startled everyone. My sister emerged, holding the handgun with a steadiness that surprised even me. "Let him go," she demanded, her voice firm. The tension in the room was palpable. The figures exchanged glances, weighing their options. They hadn't expected us to fight back, and that hesitation was all we needed. In the chaos that followed, I lunged for Marcus, untying his bonds as my sister kept the men at bay. We moved quickly, adrenaline fueling our escape. As we fled the warehouse, sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus had managed to send a distress signal before being captured, alerting the authorities. We didn't stop running until we were far from the scene, collapsing in an alleyway, gasping for breath. The raid on the warehouse was a success. The leaders of the organization were captured, their plans dismantled. But even in victory, I knew the fight wasn't truly over. The darkness of the network ran deep, and there would always be shadows lurking. Back in the safety of our new home, I reflected on the journey. The story had started as an investigation into a mysterious clinic, but had unraveled into a nightmare that threatened everything I held dear. But through it all, I had learned one thing: truth, no matter how dark, must be brought to light. As I sat down to write the final chapter of my story, I knew the battle against the shadows wasn't just mine. It was a fight for everyone who had ever been silenced, for every victim hidden in the dark. And as long as I had breath, I would continue to shine a light on the truth, no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed the raid on the warehouse, life took on a surreal quality. The news of the operation's downfall spread like wildfire, making headlines across the globe. The public was horrified, and the authorities scrambled to ensure that such atrocities would never happen again. But beneath the surface, I felt a persistent unease. The fight might have ended for now, but I knew the remnants of that dark network were still out there, lurking, waiting for their next move. Marcus, my sister, and I kept a low profile, each of us trying to piece our lives back together. For Marcus, the experience had been a wake-up call. His usual cocky bravado was replaced with a more cautious, reflective demeanor. He threw himself into helping others navigate the dangers of the dark web, using his skills to shut down similar operations before they could gain traction. My sister, though physically unharmed, carried the psychological scars of her ordeal. She sought therapy and began volunteering at a local shelter, finding solace in helping others. The trauma had forged an unbreakable bond between us, and we leaned on each other as we tried to heal. As for me, the journalist in me couldn't rest. The story might have been over for the world, but I knew better. I dug deeper, following leads and whispers that suggested the network's tentacles reached further than anyone had imagined. They had been weakened, but not destroyed. One evening, as I sifted through old notes and new findings, a knock at the door startled me. I peered through the peephole to find a familiar face, Detective Harper, the officer who had led the raid on the warehouse. "I thought you might like to see this," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside were documents, evidence from the raid that hadn't been released to the public. It detailed other clinics, hidden facilities, and encrypted communications between members of the organization. "They were bigger than we thought," Harper admitted. "We're still uncovering their operations, but there's a bigger problem. Some of the key players we thought we'd captured, well, they've vanished." The weight of his words settled heavily on my chest. The organization was regrouping, slipping through the cracks of the justice system. They were out there, and they weren't finished. I thanked Harper and spent the next few days poring over the document. Each page painted a picture of a sprawling network, deeply embedded in various industries, from pharmaceuticals to private research firms. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply the corruption ran. Then, one night, I received an anonymous message. The sender claimed to have information about the network's new leader, a shadowy figure who had been orchestrating their resurgence from the shadows. They wanted to meet, but the location was risky, a secluded spot on the outskirts of town. It reeked of a trap, but I couldn't ignore it. I informed Marcus and Harper, who insisted on backing me up from a distance. With my heart pounding, I made my way to the rendezvous point, a derelict building that looked like it had seen better days. Inside, the air was thick with tension. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a hood. "I know what you're doing," the figure said, their voice distorted. "And I know you want to stop them. I can help." They handed me a USB drive, their hands trembling. "This has everything you need. Locations, names, plans. But you have to be careful. They know you're watching." Before I could ask any questions, the figure disappeared into the night, leaving me with more questions than answers. Back at Marcus's place, we examined the contents of the drive. It was a treasure trove of information, encrypted files, maps of hidden facilities, and communication logs between high-ranking members of the organization. "This is it," Marcus whispered. "This could bring them down for good." But with the information came danger. The organization would stop at nothing to protect their secret. We needed a plan, a way to expose them without putting ourselves or others at risk. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, collaborating with Harper and trusted members of law enforcement. We set traps, leaked false information to draw them out, and slowly, methodically, dismantled their operations. Each raid, each arrest, brought us closer to the heart of the network. In the end, it wasn't a dramatic showdown that brought them down, but a relentless, calculated campaign of exposure. We shone a light into every dark corner, leaving them nowhere to hide. The new leader was captured, their plans laid bare for the world to see. As the dust settled, I felt a sense of closure. The network was broken, its power diminished. But I knew the fight against such darkness was never truly over. There would always be those who thrived in the shadows, exploiting the vulnerable for their gain. But for now there was peace. My sister, Marcus, and I could finally breathe, knowing we had made a difference. The truth had prevailed, and the shadows had been pushed back, if only for a while. I returned to journalism, driven by a newfound purpose. There were always more stories to uncover, more truths to tell. and as long as there were shadows, I would be there to shine a light. Months passed, and the scars of the ordeal began to fade, but the memories remained vivid, haunting the quiet moments of my life. Despite the victories, a lingering sense of unease persisted. The network's reach had been vast, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface. One evening, as I sat in my small apartment, a familiar sensation crept over me, the feeling of being watched. I dismissed it as paranoia, a residue from the chaos of the past months. But as the days went on, the feeling intensified. Strange things began to happen. My phone would ring, and no one would be on the other end. Emails from untraceable addresses would appear in my inbox, filled with cryptic messages and veiled threat. It wasn't just me. Marcus reported similar incidents. His system was breached, files tampered with, as if someone was leaving a breadcrumb trail, luring us into another dark game. My sister noticed it too, small signs that our enemies were still watching, still plotting. One night, the fear became reality. A package arrived at my door, unmarked, with no return address. Inside was a single item, a USB drive, identical to the one the anonymous figure had given me months earlier. Hesitant, I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting it to be a trap. Instead, I found a single video file. The footage was grainy but clear enough to recognize the setting. A dimly lit room with a lone figure tied to a chair. The camera panned slowly, revealing the face of someone I hadn't seen in years. A former colleague from my early days as a journalist, someone who had mysteriously disappeared after a story gone wrong. A distorted voice played over the video. "We know you're still digging. Stop now, or this will be your fate." The message was clear. The remnants of the network were not just watching, they were retaliating. They had resurfaced, stronger, more determined, and they were sending a message. If I continued, the consequences would be dire. I contacted Harper immediately, sharing the video. His response was grim. "They're sending a warning. They want you to back off. But this also means they're scared. They're vulnerable." Despite the risk, I couldn't ignore the call to action. With Harper's help, Marcus and I began to trace the origins of the video. It led us to an abandoned facility on the outskirts of a neighboring city, a place that had once been a hub for illegal activities but was thought to be shut down. The facility was a maze of dark corridors and hidden rooms, each step echoing with the weight of the past. We moved cautiously, aware that at any moment we could walk into another trap. But what we found was more sinister than we could have imagined. Hidden beneath the facility was a network of tunnels, leading to rooms filled with equipment, computers, medical supplies, and files documenting years of illegal experiments. It was a new operation, one that had risen from the ashes of the old. They were more secretive, more careful, but their endgame remained the same: exploitation and control. As we gathered evidence, a sense of dread settled over me. This wasn't just a resurgence, it was an evolution. The network had adapted, learning from their previous failures, and now they were back, more dangerous than ever. Before we could leave, an alarm sounded. We had been discovered. The next moments were a blur of chaos, shouts, footsteps, and the sharp sting of adrenaline. We barely escaped, clutching the evidence that would once again bring their operations to light. Back in the safety of Harper's office, we reviewed the findings. It was damning. Proof of the network's revival, their new operations, and their leaders. We knew exposing them again would only lead to temporary relief. They had resources, connections, and the ability to hide in the shadows. But we also knew that giving up was not an option. The fight against such darkness was relentless, but so was the resolve to bring it down. We prepared for another round, aware that this was a battle of endurance, a war against an enemy that thrived in the hidden corners of society. As the days turned into weeks, we launched another series of exposés, working with international authorities to dismantle the network piece by piece. Each raid, each arrest was a small victory, but the war raged on. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the journey, a relentless pursuit of truth in a world that preferred the comfort of ignorance. I had been thrust into a nightmare, but in the process, I had discovered strength I never knew I had. The shadows would always be there, lurking, waiting. But so would I, with a pen in one hand and a light in the other, ready to expose the darkness, no matter how deep it ran.